I thought I'd begin with the very first case of dyslexia that's ever described in the literature. This is a case described by a British physician, a very British name, W. Pringle Morgan, and he described this the late 19th century, almost the turn of the 20th century, in the British Medical Journal. And he described a young man who, in that era, he called congenital word blindness. But this young man has symptoms that today we see so often in children with dyslexia. He described this 14-year-old Percy. He has always been a bright and intelligent boy, quick at games, and in no way inferior to others of his age. His great difficulty has been, and is now, his inability to learn to read. And in 1996, Sally was asked to write an article for Scientific American celebrating the 100th anniversary of the first description of dyslexia. And this is still one of the most quoted articles, and we received more requests for reprints from this article than from many others. We'd like to emphasize that dyslexia is really, we like to use the word dyslexia and not learning disabilities. Dyslexia is specific and learning disabilities are non-specific. Learning disability is actually a general term, and we compare it to infectious diseases like, oh, you have a viral illness. Whereas dyslexia is very specific, so it's like a strep throat. Oh, you have a strep throat. I know it's a strep throat because I've cultured it, and streptococcus comes out as a culture, and we know what the causative agent is, and we know exactly how to treat it. We give some penicillin, and we can use this very accurate and specific term, dyslexia. We actually have a very recent and excellent definition of dyslexia, a 21st century definition that was passed by the U.S. Senate unanimously, bipartisan resolution 284, just this month, and passed, sponsored by Senators Cassidy and Warren and Murphy and Graham and others. And this codifies dyslexia as an unexpected difficulty in reading, unexpected for an individual who has the intelligence to be a much better reader. And we actually have scientific validation of the unexpected nature. This is Sally has a longitudinal epidemiologic study which began in 1983 when we randomly selected children in Connecticut in kindergarten, public kindergartens, and have followed that group of children for 34 years. The original 5-year-olds are now 39 years old. We followed them this entire time, and when they were in grade school and high school, we tested them every year, and every other year we gave them an IQ test. And what we were able to track is their IQ and their reading over time. And typical readers who don't have dyslexia, their IQ and their reading are dynamically linked. Sally calls them kissing cousins. IQ influences reading, reading influences IQ. And this goes along with the expectation that if you're a good reader, you're intelligent, and if you're intelligent, you're a good reader. And that's fine, and that holds for typical readers. But in dyslexic readers, it's quite different. You can be very smart and be a very poor reader. And this data is really very strong scientific validation of the unexpected nature of dyslexia. Dyslexia is very common, highly prevalent, affecting 1 child in 5. Now you may say, well, that seems like a lot of people. Isn't that too many? We see a lot. We see data that's a lot less. Well, In fact, if you look at school-reported data, schools don't seem to identify children with dyslexia. And they report prevalence rates of 0 or 3% or 4%. And that problem reflects the failure of schools to identify dyslexia. And when we actually study every single child, as Sally did in her epidemiologic longitudinal study, 1 in 5 students are affected. And we emphasize to be counted, you must first be identified. And if you're not identified, you can't be counted. And, well, you say, that 1 in 5, that seems like a lot. Well, if you look at federal data, national data from National Assessment of Educational Progress, this is the so-called Nation's Report Card, and this is based on every odd year the federal government does cross-sectional studies of children in 4th grade and children in 8th grade across the country, and several thousand children. And they classify the reading into below basic and proficient and advanced. And consistently, the 1998 data it's got a star next to it because they were had different norms at that year. But for the last few years, 1/3 of the children in these national studies are below basic. In fact, only about 1/4 of the children were reading at proficient, maybe 1/3 at advanced. But this is very worrisome, and this is even higher than the 1 in 5 that we find. So either way, dyslexia is very, very common. And it's the most common of all learning disabilities. It affects 80 to 90% of all children classified as learning disabled. We've shown it here in this pie chart. If you have a population of children with learning disability, 80 to 90% of those children are dyslexic. Dyslexia is universal. Sally's book, Overcoming Dyslexia, which she wrote in English, has been translated into many languages. Kayla read our bios, and you can hear some of them, but many alphabetic languages, but also, to our surprise, in many logographic languages. So several dialects in Chinese, formal Mandarin, but also a more common dialect, and Japanese, and Korean as well. And this is Sally with a group of dyslexic Japanese students and their teachers and parents in our visit to Japan. So this is a common problem. It's universal. It occurs in every language. We've learned a great deal about the neurobiology of dyslexia because of the emergence of functional magnetic resonance imaging, which uses fMRI, magnetic waves, to look at the brain at work. And here is Casey, one of the children who participates in our studies, and she's in a traditional imager, and she's looking up through a prism, and she has a button on her hand, and she's looking at one of our favorite tasks, which is whether, tell us, as she's looking at these words, whether these nonsense words rhyme. And as you'll hear in a minute, she's essentially, we're assessing the child's phonological processing and we like to use nonsense words because the children haven't memorized them. And this is very user-friendly, as Casey, none the worse for wear at the end of her imaging. It is really a very user-friendly technology. There's no radiation, so it's ideal in children with something like dyslexia. And let me give you a short course in anatomy. We're looking at a schematic view of the left side of the brain. Here in the front is the frontal lobes. There's one here on the left side, there's another one on the right side. Behind the frontal lobes are the parietal lobes, they're shown in pink. Beneath these are the temporal lobes, shown in yellow. And behind it is the occipital lobe, shown in blue. And what's been found in many, many studies is that there are 3 important systems in reading. Again, a schematic of the left side of the brain is the front and the back of the brain. There's a system in the front of the brain around an area called Broca's area that's important in reading. Another area in the parietal temporal region around an area called Wernicke's area that's important in reading. And still a third area important in reading, particularly for fluent reading, is called the occipital temporal, or the word fluent system. And what's been shown in many, many studies around the world is that there's a neural signature for dyslexia. And that neural signature is schematically shown here. Left side of the brain again, front and back. Typical readers, 3 systems for reading. 1 in the front of the brain, 2 in the back of the brain. In dyslexic readers, we see a system in the front of the brain might be a bit more active than in typical readers, but the important thing is there's an inefficient functioning of those systems in the back of the brain. You just don't see them activated here. And that's, that finding is referred to as the neural signature for dyslexia. And this has been replicated around by many, many studies. Here is one of our studies years ago showing these 3 systems activated in typical readers and inefficient functioning in the dyslexic readers, looking at sort of the brain from the side. And here again, front of the brain, back here. This is an image by one of our colleagues, Fabio Ricklin in Austria, and he did a meta-analysis. He took many studies and found that over all of these studies, the same thing I just told you we're seeing. Systems that were disrupted in the front of the brain and the back of the brain. And we also know that these neural systems are universal. This is a study of college students in England, France, and Italy, published over a decade ago by Geraldo Palacio in Milan, Italy. Here's the front of the brain and the back of the brain. And regardless of the native language spoken by these college students, English, French, or Italian, the same fondness, there was this inefficient functioning of these systems in the left side of the back of the brain. And subsequently, these same findings have been reported in German dyslexic students and pretty much the same in Chinese dyslexic students. So we see that brain imaging has taught us about a neural signature for dyslexia. It's this inefficient functioning of neural systems for skilled fluent reading. And the important thing is it's made visible what was previously a hidden disability. I warn you that brain imaging is not the way you diagnose dyslexia. These nice images are created from groups of individuals with dyslexia compared to groups of individuals who are typical readers. The brain imaging is just not sensitive enough to determine an individual person. But in groups of people, you can see these very nice images. But fortunately, the diagnosis of dyslexia is not made by brain imaging in either children or adults.